Hello, thank you for joining us today on this Wednesday Humpday Hangout. I'm Terry McGrath, Assistant Chief, Louisville Fire Department. Typically at this time, it's myself and Chief Lasky. Chief Lasky is honoring a commitment out spreading the good word in the fire service. So we wish him well wherever he is. I'm certain it's probably cooler than it is here. But anyway, we're here every third Wednesday of the month, and glad you could join us. Um, just real quick, if you want to shoot any questions to us or interact with us today during the show, you can do that via Twitter using hashtag FE Fire Engineering Talk, hashtag FE Talk. And if you want to post questions there, they'll get those to us, and we'll do our best to answer any of those. As a reminder, FDIC registration is open. That'll be April 20th through the 25th. Obviously, don't wait. If you've been there, you know the struggle is real when it comes to housing and finding a place to stay. So if you're thinking about FDIC this year, don't wait. I've got two guests with me today. I put this show together pretty quickly with the help of Chief Thompson. Chief Thompson with the Colony Fire Department. He's a familiar face on this show. I was talking to him the other day, and he brought up the topic of Mayday and of Don Abbott's website, Project Mayday, and I thought it was a great idea. But to kind of add a little bit of icing to the good ideas, that the colony just recently went through an incident that resulted in a Mayday, a pretty significant fire that resulted in not only some civilians being critically injured and burned, they had some firefighter injuries as well. They had a Mayday. So we're joined today by, again, Chief Scott Thompson with the Colony Fire Department and Captain Chisholm Roshuber. I say that right?
Sure.
Okay. Captain Roshuber was captain on the engine on that fire. I believe he was first in. And so we get to kind of hear the firsthand story from both Chief Thompson and Captain Roshuber, and I want to talk a little bit about their specific incident, what went right, what went wrong. Hopefully, learn a lot from what happened there in the colony, and so anyway, we'll get into all that, and then we want to talk a little bit about what Mr. Abbott has put out there on his website for Project Mayday. If you haven't taken a look at that, it's a wealth of information, very interesting data that he has compiled regarding Maydays. Before we jump into this, Scott, you'll be presenting this year at FDIC. I mentioned that registration was open. What are you teaching this year?
I'm doing the same thing that I did last year, the training basics essentials from the candidate to the fire chief, and we're doing that on Tuesday. So looking forward. It's a 4-hour workshop. Looking forward to doing that again. We had a lot of fun last year.
All right, and you want to plug the book? How's the
book is doing great. I just got my first big order, so I got like 20 books going out to one department. So I guess they're going to use that as promotions or something. But the book is doing well. The speaking tour is picking up a little bit, so I really got to manage that because I still have a job. But everything is going well, and I'm getting some fantastic feedback. So I guess everything is going as it should.
All right, excellent. Glad to hear that. All right, let's get into it. We're talking about Maydays, and what I had put out as a title for the show was preparing for the Mayday. And the reason I kind of selected that word preparing, and I feel like we do a great job training for Maydays and the response part to a Mayday, but really, after looking through the overwhelming amount of data that is on this website regarding Maydays, it really raises a lot of questions in my mind as far as taking what and I'm speaking for Louisville here, but taking what we do, how we prepare, or how we set up to respond to a Mayday at an incident. And so I'm looking at a lot of the numbers, a lot of the data that he's gotten, and I'm kind of applying that to what our recipe is to handle a Mayday at an incident. And so that's where I'm getting back to this whole preparing thing, because I think this raises a lot of questions and validates a lot of things that a lot of people have said for years, like, do you have an adequate number of personnel to respond to a Mayday, and are you set up properly on the fire scene, or is it a matter of that we're checking a box to say that we've addressed the writ functionality on the fire ground, and by putting people on a tarp in the corner of the yard, although that satisfies the checkbox, but from a functional standpoint, does it work? So anyway, that's kind of stuff we're going to get into. But I want to start this off, and I'm just going to throw it to both Chief Thompson, Captain Rush. Just walk us through your recent fire, and just start from the beginning of this thing, and kind of walk us through what happened that day.
Terry, I'll talk a little bit about how we're set up right up to the company going in, and I'll let Chisholm take over and talk about his part. We're a very average suburban department. We're running 3 stations right now, and this fire came in on August 8th, right at 6:30 in the morning. We changed crew at 7 o'clock, is shift change, so that played into it a little bit from an accountability standpoint. We had those coming on shift that jumped on the rigs, but this was a strange house. It was a main house that they added a mother-in-law suite to. So we got the call that it was a working fire, and the dispatcher was on the phone to the mother, and we can hear on the video where she's saying, "I can't get my son outside. He's staying in to fight the fire." So we knew right away that we had a working fire and that we had people trapped. Now, our standard response is we send 2 engines, a truck, and a rescue, and those 2 marry up to get us our 5-person truck company, a battalion chief, and 2 medics, and then we call mutual aid from Louisville and Little Elm to give us our 3rd and 4th engine. So the way that we work, our first engine on, and we're very much into this pre-arrival assignments. Everybody's got a job. So our first engine gets on scene, and that was engine 11 and their fire attack. And I'll let Chief or Captain Rashiver talk about that in just a second. Our second engine is what we call our fire attack support team, and they establish a water supply, and they become our initial IRIT on a fire early stages. The truck splits up, inside truck, outside truck, and then we have an outside control position. Most people call it an outside event. And then, of course, the battalion chief, who had an aid or a fit this morning. And I'll mention we had a step-up battalion chief, captain stepping up, who did an outstanding job on this. So that's kind of how we're laid out. And then our 3rd engine, when they get on scene, becomes our rapid intervention team. And our 4th engine is our tactical reserve. Once the tactical reserve is assigned, before we go under control, we call for a second alarm. On this incident, we went to a second alarm actually before the Mayday was transmitted because of the construction of the house. And I'll also remind you, this was a hoarder situation, and it was a wind-driven event. So I'll let Chisholm, Captain Rashiver, talk a little bit about what he saw and what he did in the early stages of the event.
All right, everybody. Like Chief Thompson said, the fire was toned at 6:34 in the morning, so we did have an extra guy that held over. So we had 5 people on the engine. So en route, we get in our box book and we get our hydrant locations. Everything was going good. It's on the street it was on. It's what we call Fox and Jacob's house. Fox and Jacobs built the house. It's pretty typical in the colony. They're usually our bread and butter. We're very successful, or have been successful on those in the past. So we get going. We're confident we have a hydrant right across the street from the house. Get there, and about when we're pulling up, they said that what I remember hearing in the engine was that there are 3 people trapped. What ended up being said was 2 people and a dog, but from multiple people having heard 3 people trapped, that's what we went with. So we get out, I sized it up. We had heavy smoke, but I could see no fire at that time. We pulled just a little bit past the house so we could leave the front of the house for our truck company. So when I get out, our rescue company that's paired up with the truck that usually does search pulled past us. So I knew we had our fire attack team and our search team there. So I started doing my 360. On the delta side of the house was a chain link fence with no gate. So I leaned over the fence as far as I could, got a pretty good view of the back, but I missed just enough to kind of put myself in a bind. So I looked back that way, started walking across the front of the house. And as I was walking, I could tell like this is a little bit bigger of a house than what a typical Fox and Jacobs house is, but I didn't put two and two together at that time. Whenever they said that there was people trapped, I went from being calm, cool to everything amping up. So I felt like I was in more of a hurry to get there, size everything up, and get in and try to make a difference. So this was also my first fire as a captain. I'm newly promoted, so this was the first one. So I was ready to go, but then everything started snowballing. So as I was walking around to the Alpha Bravo division, I saw one of our police officers with a victim. He was a white male, but completely black because of the soot and everything. And the police officer, he had soot all over him as well. So I could tell that this guy just came out of the house. I don't know where he came out from. And I asked the police officer, I said, is everybody out? He said, I don't know. So at that point, I was fairly confident that we still had people in the house. So I was going to finish up my 360. I went to the back, and on the back on the Bravo Charlie corner was where the garage was. The garage door was open. The door to go in the house was closed, and there was no smoke in the garage. There was smoke coming out of the eaves. And so instead of a 360, I cut it short, and that's another thing that I'll never do again. But I cut it just short enough to where I couldn't see the back of the house where the fire started. So ends up there was a lot of fire back there, and I didn't see it. So I stopped there. I came back around, and the guys on the engine with me had the hose bled. We're masking up. We were going in. We had a high probability of people in the house. The search team was there ready to make entry. We were ready to go in. So we mask up, force the door. We have a push of smoke come out, but at that time it was nothing that we hadn't pushed in the past and made an effort. So we go in. We had moderate heat, pretty heavy smoke, but you had some visibility. As soon as we made entry through the front door, you could feel the heat. You could tell where the fire was. I remember it on my right side. So we went in and advanced in, and we weren't in but 10 or 15 feet. And I'll tell you guys some things that I didn't pick up on that I wish I would have. But so we go in, we start flowing, and nothing. Before we advanced, I had my tick, I scanned, and there was no victims in that living room. So at that point, I wish I could have had more situational awareness and been like, all right, so we don't have any victims in this area. We can't be too committed in this area. So we pushed up, got into a position to where we thought we could hit the fire, started flowing, and we had no change, no change at all. And I wish I would have picked up on this sooner. And I feel like on this fire, everything I did, I was a step behind the game. So when we went in, I wish like right away we'd had it in it. If I could go back, that's what I would have done. But we went in, we weren't getting any change, conditions weren't getting any better. Called for the truck to vent. We got there so fast and got in so quick, they weren't set up to do it yet. So even if they were coming off the truck, it would have still been probably 2 minutes for them guys to do their thing. So everything just stacking against us. We didn't get any changes. We weren't getting the relief we needed. Made the call. I was like, let's get out of here. So there was two of us inside. It was myself, the guy on the nozzle, and there was a guy at the door who bumped up to feed in hose. He heard me say, let's get out. He went out. I guess the door got closed up against the hose. We're trying to find our way out. We couldn't. I remember conditions changed in an instant. It went from moderate heat to pretty low visibility to very intense heat, no visibility. It's funny, we had talked about a line of duty death through a training scenario a few weeks prior, and we had a discussion of, there hasn't been a line of duty of guys on a hose line flowing water. And it turns out I feel like this saved us, or at least bought us some time, but we got pinned down. He held that nozzle wide open. We got underneath that nozzle. I was trying to find my way out. We had too much hose in the house. I just picked up loops and loops of hose, so I couldn't follow the hose out. And I remember turning with my tick, and I couldn't see the door. And so we were in the middle of the living room, and I was kicking back, and just everywhere I was kicking, I wasn't hitting anything. And the farther I got from that nozzle, by far, the hotter it was. So I knew that I couldn't get off that hose and, pinball our way out of there. So at that point, I realized we lost all control of the situation. We needed help. The only thing we really needed was somebody to open that front door so we could orient ourselves to get out. But that's when I decided to call the Mayday. That was just my instinct. The training that I've had, that was my thing to do. So I called the Mayday, and I'll be the first to tell you, had we needed more than somebody to open that door, I feel like I would have doomed us. It wasn't clear on the radio. The guys on scene could tell that something was wrong by the tone of my voice, but I didn't paint a very good picture for anybody to come in and get us if we needed it to that extent. So at that point, we called it. The guy who was outside was like, "Where are they at?" He opened the door, yelled. We heard where he was, made our way out, and luckily it's no worse than it was. So that's kind of the situation to that point, and it is what it is.
So first of all, I want to say thank you very much for sharing the story. And there's a couple things I want to say. I want to say, first of all, when you say this is your first fire as being promoted to captain, so nothing like being thrown into the fire right on that one. And but again, the fact that you're as candid and obviously honest about what happened, and I think that's exactly what it takes to tell your story. Because so I was sitting here scribbling some notes, and I was thinking to myself, and I don't quite know how to phrase the question, but because one of the things in Don Abbott's report on Project Mayday, and it talks about the hesitancy to call a Mayday. And there's a lot of factors that he'll list as to why people don't do it. One of those being, well, people will knock me, or, if it's, and like you said, well, it's just as simple as opening a door. We'd open the door, we knew where we were. So, but was there, in your mind, I guess, maybe that 15 seconds or 10 seconds leading up to you deciding to key that radio and say Mayday, but was there hesitancy in your thought process as to say it or not to say it, or I'm going to wait 2 more seconds? I'm going to, was there anything going through your mind like that?
So and I talk to a lot of guys that I talk to. If you're tangled up or you're just lost, you're not burning, I think you can do better. I don't feel like I hesitated, but we felt like we were burning. I've had 2nd-degree burns on my wrist. I had 1st-degree burns on my legs. The guys I was in there with, they both got burned as well. So I don't think there was any hesitation. I knew we were in a bad spot. I kind of say I wish I'd have just told him to open the door. It's just not what we were trying to do. I think we were in a situation I couldn't control. That's the only thing I could think of to do. And I did it. I wish it would have been better. Me, especially being an officer, I think you got to have the calm, cool, collective to, no matter what the situation is to call a good Mayday. You're clear, concise, and you can get out what you need. We have a thing in the colony, who, what, where, air. That's what we're supposed to do when we call a Mayday. I didn't do that. It was Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is engine 11. We need help. That's what I said. That's all I could think of to say at the time. And lucky for me, that's all we needed was him to open the door. But I don't think there was hesitation, but I wish I would have, if it makes sense, hesitated just a little bit, took a deep breath, got my thoughts, and got out a good, clear Mayday to give us a better chance, assuming we would have needed it. So, but I don't think there was hesitation.
Well, but I'll also say this, that, Chief Lasky used to say when he worked here was that, you should always be one alarm ahead of everything, right? So If you're waiting to the point that you're like, oh shit, this is bad, it's you're behind the curve, and that's a problem. And I always say that it's extremely problematic for an agency like the Colony, and it's problematic for Louisville too, because our next set of resources is not right around the corner. If I have to call, if City of Louisville has to call the Colony, or Colony calls City of Louisville, that's a process, and we're losing valuable time. So I will say, I think it's interesting the way you phrase it, like, well, if I could have just got the door open, but I applaud the fact that you said it and say it in a hurry, because time is, I mean, it's the most valuable thing you got right now, and don't waste any of it. So I would say from that standpoint, I think kudos to you. You mentioned a couple things, and just as you're talking and I'm listening, comparing things you're saying to comparing it to the Project Mayday report. One of the things you said was, and I don't want, just for clarification's sake, but on your 360, you said you went around to one side, you kind of peeked over a fence, but the end result was you didn't get a complete 360. Is that, yeah? And so, but that's referenced in, and it referenced into, you use the word situational awareness, and that's referenced in here. As a matter of fact, situational awareness accounted for 79% in a particular question in here, and I think that's telling. So it's obviously telling you that that slowdown and mentality of you got to take it all in. When you say, and I'm just making the assumption that we get in a hurry, because everybody does, especially when this is a job where you've got life safety issues in this particular incident. So everything's ramped up, and I think you move that much quicker. One of the stats in this report that I found really interesting, but it talked about seatbelt usage on crews responding, and so seatbelt usage, I'm assuming in a lot of fire departments, it's like getting in your personal car. You don't even think about it anymore. You just put it on. But it says in Abbott's report that 88% didn't wear a seatbelt when they're responding to something or a Mayday situation. And that speaks to me is because the thought process at that point, everyone is moving so fast. And so we're deviating a little bit from what the norm is. And I think that expediency, the deviation, is what contributes to getting people in trouble. Scott, obviously this comes in at that hour of the morning. I know you were there, but so at what point were you there? What was your role, and how did this play out? Because I know you had some firefighters injured, you had some civilians injured.
Right. Well, I'm listening to the radio, and I'm not too far away. I didn't hear the Mayday on the radio. I heard some of the traffic and some of the urgency, but I never picked up the Mayday. As I said, we had a step up battalion chief who did an outstanding job. I mean, you talk about somebody who really kept his calm, had a second alarm coming quickly, very quickly, did a par and accounted for all companies. So the system worked very well. When I got on scene, I mean, Chisholm and his crew continued to work. We still had a very active fire. We did have 2 civilians that were on the way to the hospital. And by that point, the truck company went and started a vent enter search. And so we were pretty certain as you can be under those conditions without doing a secondary search, that we did not have any more of life safety issues. So we started to focus on fire attack, getting the fire put out. The system worked very well. And just for some of the fire nerds out there, I mean, we were flowing with 7/8 inch a smooth bore with true ID hose. We were flowing 160, 165 gallons per minute. Everybody on the line had either been through smoke divers or nozzle forward or up with Brian Brush. So we had a lot of training. So everything is, as far as the system, I think it worked well. The fact that those 2 burn people that Captain Rashi was referring to, they went to our rapid intervention crew. So they were tied up for just a minute connecting those burn patients to the medics. That was kind of a factor. And then our truck crew, the pitch of the roof, they couldn't go over to the side that engine 11, which is Captain Rosshuber's crew, was on, because the roof was no good, they reported. So when they did cut a hole, they cut it over the bedroom. So that vertical vent was not effective because they felt that was the best. So all those things kind of come into play. But when I got there, obviously I was concerned about the condition of our firefighters. That was the first thing I wanted to check. Command had things going well. There was an incident technician. But this is one of the side notes of something. I guess that the one thing that concerned me and the top three things, one of them is everybody kind of downplay the burns of our firefighters. They didn't want to go to the hospital. Our medics were telling us, hey, it's okay. It's no big deal. Well, it went from that to one of them going into the burn unit overnight, getting skin graft or getting cadaver skin put on to a pretty significant burn. So we're certainly going to look at that and saying, hey, we get any burns, we're going to go to a burn center and we'll figure it out from there. But other than that, I mean, I think the system worked very well. We adjusted well. Chisholm, talked about his 360 and the communication on the Mayday. I know that's something he'll beat himself up over, but overall, I mean, the second alarm was coming. My fear in tying into what Chisholm said, if they needed a little bit more help than what they did, I was concerned that rapid intervention team, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, even beefing that up. I mean, we have a 3-person RIT that early in the incident. This happened in the first 8 minutes of the incident. So we're just setting parking brakes and setting up. But one of my concerns is the what if they needed a little bit more help. I don't know how quickly we would have reacted. We had the truck crew that was doing, or the rescue crew doing the BS. We could have pulled them in. But that concerns me a little bit. But overall, I mean, I've heard a million times it's not okay to send firefighters to the hospital. Well, yeah, it's not. But this is a situation where we're going to learn some great lessons from it, and luckily the scars will be minor. But I think given the conditions, we did what we needed to do.
Well, and sure, and I'll speak to that to tell you that that I think that the dart throwers want to sit over here and say, well, you could have done this, and Cap, I'm sure you've replayed this 1,000 times in your mind. Well, guess what? The one thing I can tell you for certain is you don't have a chance to do this over. So you do the best you can, and I think that the most successful outcomes come from those who do a lot of the preparation on the front end. I know for a fact the colony does a ton of preparation. Scott brings up the point about how you actually, what's the effective implementation of RIT and the staffing and things. And I want to talk about that here in a minute. But, I just want to tell you for certain, we had an incident with Andy Allison back in 2012 where Andy was electrocuted. There are people that are around here that probably get tired of me talking about that or referring to that incident, but it's as significant of an injury that we've ever had, or certainly that I've been a part of in my 32 years in public safety, as far as an incident that I was actually a part of. And I'll say it in a negative way, but to drive my point home, I'll exploit the hell out of that incident if it helps the next person, the next crew, the whatever. And so, I think that's the most important thing here is that I don't believe that in this job, any firefighter is going to go out there and I think perfection that's an unachievable goal. I do believe that we mitigate chaos and we do it to the best that we can and do it to where somebody doesn't get hurt, or we help protect people and those sort of things. And I think given the circumstance, I don't know that there's any fire out there that you don't ever walk away from and go, well, man, I shouldn't have done that, and I shouldn't have done this, but I certainly, from your account of the story and from everything that I have heard from several different people, we had crews that were out there that certainly relayed what they knew at the time. And I mean, it sounds like you did exactly what you needed to do. Yes. Are there things you could do better? Absolutely. That's what makes you a good company officer, is that part bugs you. It should bug you. I mean, it should. Even if someone doesn't get hurt, you should walk away from there and constantly, go back over this because I think that's all part of getting better. And I think that's important for the individual in your particular case, Cap, and I think it's good for the organization because you've got to learn from all the good things that happen and the bad things that happen. But I think the other thing that's worthy of mentioning here is that you took actions, and whether you second guess that I could have done this quicker or should have done it this way, or I should have given my report differently or taken that deep breath or whatever, but we don't know what the outcome of that is because it didn't happen. So whether that would have improved things, I don't know. I can't say, and we can speculate all day long. But I think at the end of the day, you got to put your head on a pillow and know that that in this particular instance, your particular role, you're new at this and new at that, and this is your first deal. And I think it would be illogical to say that part of that doesn't go through your head too. As is in a new role, you're looking to be famous. I don't say that in a bad way, but you're looking to get off and let's go here and put this out, and right, because that's your role now, and you want to do it to the best of your ability. So all of that, I bring all this up because all of that is mentioned in this report. The amount of data that's spooling through your head, company officer, 6:30 in the morning, we got potential victims, we got a lot going on, and so I didn't, I took 5 steps and I should have taken 6, whatever the case may be. So anyway, I think your story's a good one, and I think that that there'll be a lot of people to benefit from your experience in this, and you'll make it better for the next group of people, and I think that's important.
Terry,
Yeah.
just to tie in a little bit of the Project Mayday, when we went back and listened, and we've studied this, and I was a huge fan of it from the get-go. I knew Don Abbott when he was doing his Abbottsville. You remember, he used to travel around the country with that, and then he helped Chief Brunacini do their tactical command center. But a lot of the things that he says in his report were evident here. He talks about the companies reporting, obviously, increased heat, the need for ventilation, conditions changing, and all those things I think are really important. You take this information and put it in the hands of your incident commanders, your FITs, your field incident technicians, whatever you want to call them, your safety officers. There's a lot of things here that can tell you that there's a probability of this Mayday coming. And like you said, Chief Lasky always taught us to be proactive. And I think every good incident, any incident commander can be reactive. The great ones are proactive. As I said here, Captain Russell already had a second alarm coming. I don't know if he was anticipating a Mayday, but it didn't shake him out of its boots when it happened. And that's a tough order for any incident commander to manage the operation. And typically we have a position to do that. It happened so early, we weren't set up. We usually, in our system, just like you guys, we have an incident commander and we establish operations. And when the Mayday goes down, that operations position takes over the firefighter rescue. We just hadn't had that established yet. But all the information in here, as you said, is reinforced. I mean, it was a residential structure. All the signs and indicators were kind of there, and it's the bread and butter things, as Captain Reishuber said. I mean, we go to these all the time. This is our capability. And this one, with it being an exterior fire that went interior, wind-driven, hoarder situation, all those things, were the things. And it's never one thing. It's always a combination of things, small things that lead to an event like this. We're very fortunate that the guys weren't burned worse. But again, I think we did as well as we trained to do. We'll train a little differently and change some things up. And one of them is looking at that RIT function. And I know we talked a little bit beforehand. You guys are doing some stuff with your truck, but we know now that second engine's got a lot to do. How do we prevent that from happening again, so that they're ready to respond if that first crew gets in trouble?
Well, and it's there's a slide in Don's in the Project Mayday, and it basically is talking about that idea, that normalization of deviancy, and that's always a fascinating thing to me, because I think that really plays into, certainly, I always make mention of the fact that my job around here is I stand and watch a lot of things, and I see a lot of things that other people don't see. And simply because, I'm just standing here, and if I'm watching these guys get on the rigs and go to a call, I'm just standing there observing it. They're task focused, whether that's coming out, putting their gear on, talking to one another about an address or a location or it's a frequent flyer, whatever the case may be. But their brains and their wheels are in motion to do the things that they do normally. And so I think the idea of somebody really watching, and that's where I get from this report, is because I think you have the ability to read this. And I don't think there's a firefighter out there that would read this report and not come across about every 5 slides and go, oh, yeah, I've seen that. Yep, I know exactly what he's talking about there. And so that's where I think we, in our own operations and our own, methodology, how we get out there and work, we tend to settle down into these routines or habits or the normalization of our day-to-day or our normalization of how we respond. And he further states in that slide that, we also witness people do things that maybe stray outside or deviate from what the norm is. And now all of a sudden that becomes the norm because we were successful this time. So odds are we'll be successful this time. And whatever that old saying is about making you lucky doesn't make you good, whatever. But I think it speaks to, and I think there's a lot of data and information that gets thrown into the fire service, but this one is real information, and it's a tremendous read. Because I don't think that you're going to scroll through here and not be able to make pages and pages of notes to say, man, that's something we should look into that. We should make sure, for example, and I throw this out there, if people haven't read this report or especially company officers, if you don't, break this down into small little parts of your daily training. But one of the things in there, it talks about that statistically, Maydays at night are off the charts, right? There's way more in the middle of the night than there is during the day. The odd thing is you go through the report and then it lists training, how that department handled training. And they say that training for Maydays at night or training in the middle of the night for a Mayday, 8% departments did it, right? So I use that as a point to simply say, people should look at this and go, whoa, hey, that's probably something we should address and try to figure that out on the front end in the preparation thing. This data should guide your and drive your preparation. Kat, you're back to work since this fire. You still have somebody off, Scott?
Yeah, Travis Harden, the one who got the cadaver skin, he's still off, and mostly because the burns were on his neck and he can't expose that area. What's he off? Another 2 weeks? Captain Rosshuber, I think.
So
Yeah, but everybody else, Captain Rosshuber and Trent Caldwell are back to work.
So, Captain Rosshuber, so you've been back to work. So I don't know if you can share with us, so when you get back to work, are you? I know this is playing out in your mind, and I'll tell you straight up that Chief Thompson has nothing but glowing remarks about your actions that day and all the confidence in the world. But I say to this to you, and in all, does this event shake you? Does it?
absolutely.
How do you feel that next shift coming back?
I couldn't see this all the night before. So when I promoted, I moved from A shift to B shift. And so I've only been on B shift now for about 3 months. So those guys, they know me, but they don't know me. So this was my first fire being on that shift. Like, I'm going in, I was like, man, are they going to follow me? Are they going to trust me? If I was on A shift still, I don't think I would have any doubt because I've worked with those guys long enough. Like, they know me. The guys on B shift, I feel like I still have something to prove. And I'll be honest, Fox and Jacobs, that's our bread and butter. We weren't in that house 10 or 15 feet. I don't know how and it wasn't just me. Travis said he felt the same way, but we knew where we are, but just the fact that we were in that mindset that we couldn't get out, like, I'm going to be honest, it makes you question just every bit of training you've had. Just like, man, where where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? What do I do from here? And yeah, I mean, there's always something in the back of your mind. You know, the Fox and Jacobs fires. I mean, we'll go to them all day, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'll be a little rattled, you know, but I'm trying to work through it. The training that I have had, you just got to trust in that. You got to trust in your guys. You got to trust in your gut. And, you know, we have the systems in place that we have that if you do get in a bind, that we'll be able to get help and get out. But yeah, it is different going back to work, and I'm trying to get my groove again, and we'll get there. So.
Well, and again, thank you. I think that's a very candid and honest outlook on this, and I would feel the exact same way. But I'll also get back, and Chief Thompson said is that everything worked the way it should. I mean, there's a bad set of circumstances that had to be dealt with, and you don't get those circumstances at every fire. But that's why the contingencies are there for the circumstances, and in this particular case, the contingencies work. So overall, the system, you know, I guess it's one of those things that 99% of the time we only get down to level 1 because everything worked, and we great. Everybody get back on the rigs and go back to station. We'll do it again next time. And then every now and then you got to get down to level 2 or level 3, but that's why those levels are there. And so, you know, I think you know you have to you know, look at it holistically and realize that everything worked you know, the way that it should.
It did. And talked about we were kind of our injuries, and we did to an extent, but you know that we were first in on that fire. That was our fire. Like, so we went and pulled 2.5 off the back of the engine. We went around back and put it out. Like we came into that fire on that fire truck. We wanted to leave on that fire truck. That was our fire. We wanted to put it out. That was our mindset. You know, we didn't want to let it whip us. I mean, it did whip us, but we weren't going to let it win, you know. So that was the mindset. That's why we downplayed it. But the Chief is right. I mean, anytime you have injuries like that, especially like Travis had, yeah, it's best to go and get looked at immediately and get that handled. So.
Well, and I don't think I don't know. There's a lot of problems I don't know that you can solve in the fire service, but taking that pride and no, I'm not going to the doctor. I don't think you're ever going to solve that. But I think that's one of those things. I think that the you know, a chief of department, certainly battalion chiefs or even company officers, you got to get in somebody's face and say, no, this isn't an option.
That's exactly right. That's what it came down to, is saying you're going.
Yeah. You can either go of your free will or you'll go against your free will, but I guess that's your option. If you want an option, that's your option. Scott, we talked before the show a little bit. I just want to hit on this because you and I have had this conversation on more than one occasion, but let's talk about staffing for Maydays. And I say this because I think everyone out there has heard numbers, and it's funny because I hear those numbers thrown around a lot. You know, hey, a RIT team, you know, a 2-person. You know, there's departments out there that use a 2-person RIT crew, and I'm not throwing daggers at anybody because, listen, this is the smaller you are, the harder this is to manage, and so you really have to be creative, or you know, you're relying a lot on luck that things will work the way in. And so let's talk a little bit about staffing, because you mentioned what your staffing was, and so in the interest of full disclosure, so let me talk about in Louisville. We staff our third due engine is our RIT engine. So we have that 2-minute offense where everybody shows up on a fire scene. Everybody has a pre-designated assignment, so to speak, and everyone just goes to work. And then the battalion chief, he needs to make adjustments. He makes adjustments. But the third engine is the RIT engine. That's staffed with 3 people. If we're heavy staffed that day, you might be lucky that engine has 4, but it's 3. And Don Abbott's report here will bear out the truth in all of this, and the truth, especially anybody who's had to, you know, I don't take a civilian and try to get him out of a house, let alone a firefighter. But we know that 3 people won't do it. 3 people won't do it, and I think maybe that speaks a lot for the Maydays and the RIT teams that actually get into trouble in there trying to help firefighters, because we're sending them in understaffed, and we're asking them to do a monumental task. So what we recently did, we put a second ladder truck. Our ladder trucks are staffed with 5. We split those crews on a residential fire, so half of them do ventilation, half of them do search and rescue, and the fifth guy is the that outside control guy. We call him outside vent here. So, but we put a second ladder truck in service this past year, and so what we have now done on limited, we call them heavy box fires now. But we automatically dispatch that second truck to those fires, and we utilize that crew where we take the outside vent and the officer and the firefighter that are assigned search for the second truck are assigned to that 3-man RIT. So now we're at 6, which we're way, in my opinion, we're way ahead of the game. But I think we're fortunate in that we have the resource, and that resource can get there in a timely fashion. That's the other problem to all of this, right? So in jurisdictions like ours, we're oftentimes relying on mutual aid, and that's not coming in a hurry. So it's certainly hard to get this in play within the first 10 minutes of a fire, or certainly 5 minutes into a fire. But so let's talk about this and what your takeaway is on this, Scott, on this report, and what your thoughts are on how do we, what should we be looking at differently on the fire ground to really, I mentioned earlier, we check the box, we've got RIT, someone's assigned a RIT, because we sit in that command car and we go, hey, you got utilities, we got water supply, we got a primary search yet, and we got RIT, so check the box. Well, RIT means 3 people, and I don't know how effective that's going to be if I have to use them. What's your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple things, and I'm going to go back to Brett Tarver at Southwest Supermarket in Phoenix. That's when it really came out that one Mayday will lead to multiple Maydays, and it almost turns into a relay rescue. So I think we have to adjust our rapid intervention team to meet the needs of the incident, obviously. Now, I'm not opposed to that. I mentioned back when I was in Lake Cities and we had a Nissan fire, I had a 1-alarm assignment in rapid intervention. So we certainly need to beef up RIT anytime that we're getting into larger buildings, larger structures, situations that are more severe. I think an absolute, and this everybody needs to have this discussion, is what I mentioned, is you can't expect the incident commander to manage the problems that brought you there, the fire, smoke problems, and manage the Mayday. And I think, you listen to Bryan, Texas, there's a variety, and what happened in Flower Mound. It's almost like the incident commander goes into a Mayday denial, and they're either saying repeat your traffic, or exit the building, exit the building, exit the building. And they really don't know what to do next. I can't imagine what this incident would have looked like if we didn't have our pre-arrival assignments and people going to work. In other words, if that incident commander had to stop and assign everybody and tell everybody what we're doing, I'm afraid this would have had a different outcome. But one of the things interesting in the Project Mayday report, if you look at it, is 11%, the lowest number of rescue stats are performed by the rapid intervention team. So the statistics would tell you that it's more beneficial to have more people inside. And in this case, 31% said rescued by another member of his or her crew. Well, that's what happened here. Trent Caldwell was at the door, came in and saved his crew. So that was the solution. However, had this incident been a little more severe, we would have needed that rapid intervention team. So I think you got to really look at possibilities, probabilities, and certainties. We're almost hedging our bets on some of these things. Our bread and butter deals, they're so small that the window of opportunity there for saving civilians is very, very small. If we're screwing around in the front yard, carrying on, doing all this stuff, we don't have a chance in the world of saving anybody. And the fire conditions have got such, and the stability of the building such that it's much more dangerous for us to go in. So I love the idea that you guys are talking about, and I hope that, since you have that truck very close to us, that maybe we talk some point about, like you say, we call mutual aid for everything. Maybe you guys come in and you're our rapid intervention truck, so that we have an engine and a truck. We have a crew assigned to take care of the fire problem during the Mayday, and then we have a crew that's real used to doing that kind of work, dealing with rescuing the firefighter. Again, in Brett Tarver's situation, they basically burnt the building down around from the rescue area, and sometimes you have to do that. So I certainly think we'd be better. Are 2 people on an ambulance going to be successful? Man, I would hate to put anybody's fate in that situation. Like you say, 3, maybe in a small home where you're close to the door, but if they're on the 2nd floor and it's carpeted and everybody's wet and guys aren't sharp with throwing ladders, it's a whole different outcome. So it's certainly something. And like you said, I'd like to see us talk about it on a county level, because if we go mutual aid, you would hope that they're going to have the same rapid intervention capability when we're sending our guys there that we're providing our guys at home. So I think there's a whole lot of discussion that can be had there, and we can certainly do better. And let me tell you, the minute that the Mayday goes down, it's not the time to figure it out. We're going to train on some things. I mean, Chisholm, if you were to maybe pick out 1 or 2 things system wide that we need to look at, not talking about your individual decisions or actions, but how we're set up, what would you say we need to probably look at and possibly modify based on your event?
This call, we had everything stacked against us from the get-go. We had potential victims. Victims went to our fast team, which was going to be our RIT. On 99% of the fires, everything works out well. I will say that if you have a three-man engine on, that's going to be the fast. So the driver's going to be helping the other driver, so you're going to have 2 people. If you have a bigger guy on a line, so you just have 2 people to get a bigger guy out, what if there's 2 people? So I think what you guys are talking about with more people on the RIT team, I think that's definitely something that should be looked at. Because, me and Travis, if we needed help, we're both 180-pound guys. We're probably not too bad to get out. But if you have a 280, 300-pound guy, which we have, it's going to take 2 people just to get one of them out. So I would say that's definitely something to look at. And I think something else, and this might just be me, but we, especially in the colony, we do a lot of training. The wind driven flow path, like we buy into all that. Like that's science. You can't argue that. But I think we need to hit during this fire. It wasn't a windy day, but everything happened just the way it happened. I mean, it went from moderate heat to severe. Like that has got to be in the back of your mind. Every fire, no matter what, like what's the wind doing? Where's the fire? Where are the openings in the house? Like I think we can do a better job of locating all those things. And I don't know if it's everybody, but for me, that's something I've got to do better with. So those would be the 2 things that I can think of offhand.
I want you, Captain Roshuber, you said earlier, but you were mentioning when you were in flowing water, and I think I'm just trying to remember. You said that your conditions weren't improving. You were flowing water. So do you remember what because you talked about the heat and the smoke, and of course, I always go back to that the flashover simulator and what you experience in there. What you felt on that fire, or when you referenced that heat and smoke, how similar was that to like a flashover chamber? What you're feeling in a flashover chamber?
It was hot. That's the hottest I've ever been in my entire life. And we've been in hot fires. We go in hot fires in the colony. But like the spots where I was burned, like it felt like there was a blowtorch on me, and everywhere else that I didn't have burns, it just felt like just extreme heat. And you could tell a significant difference being squatted down next to that nozzle flowing wide open versus when I tried to reach out and find something to orient myself on a way to get out. So, and every bit of, human survival instincts, like you're not going to leave where you feel like you're the safest. And I couldn't get away from that nozzle far enough to figure out where to go. So, but it was very hot and very uncomfortable.
So we use that. I mean, I used to do the flashover instructing thing. And so, but we always talk about that high heat. That high heat is, and I know we talk about it a lot, but then getting back to what, I mean, truth be known, a lot of firefighters will go through their entire career and never experience anything close to what you just went through, right? It's same thing with being a police officer. I mean, the first question everybody always asks, you ever shoot anybody? Now, I mean, 99% of all police officers go an entire career and never even come close. But so given that you
Terry, I was just going to interject, hate to cut you off, but before you leave it, and Camarashi, I think I'll back this up. The nozzle technique saved this room from lighting up. Travis Harden was flowing wide open, 160, 165 gallons a minute. He was going wall, ceiling, wall, just like he'd been trained. Had they been flowing 125 gallons or 95 gallons and not paying any attention to moving that nozzle, there's no doubt in my mind that room would have lit up and we would have had a much different situation. So their crew prevented that from happening and used everything that they had, their training and that firefighting capability, to prevent something worse from happening. And I think it's important to mention that.
Well, no, and that's a great point. And that gets back to kind of where I'm sitting here thinking, because I truly believe I come out and talk about flashover. We put flashover training on and when you look at that is truly the most toxic, nasty effing environment that we expose our people to, right? But I've always felt like there's two things that are so valuable in that flashover chamber. First of all, it's a controlled way to really let people, because even in the old days, Scott, when we could light fires in houses and stuff, but I've never been in a situation that simulates what a flashover, as far as the amount of heat, the intense heat, and trying to make people understand, listen, we're exposing this to you so that you know what this feels like, and you know that you have to react to that. You have to, right? So, and that part of it. And then, I like the fire flow, or the flow path when you open that vent and can draw that fire back and whatever. So I think there's a lot of cool benefits to that flashover chamber. But I guess when I listen to you talk, this is one of the true times that I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking to myself, that sounds a lot like a flashover's coming, is what it sounded like to me. And so, and again, I think it's such a valuable experience that you were able to do. And I think that, and based on certainly what Scott just referenced and what your crew did, or are operating in the line in the manner that they did, I'll also say this, that you guys are flowing a lot of water. So, I'm not a scientist, but I do believe that a lot of water puts out fire. And stop trying to figure out about how much I need. Put as much as you possibly can. It drives me crazy to listen to people talk about, well, they're going to calculate whatever. Hey, listen, I want whatever you can get. I want in that room or in that building or whatever. That's my thoughts on it, and we'll keep it simple at that. We're wrapping up here today, and again, I urge anyone out there, if you have not had the opportunity to go to Project Mayday, it's projectmayday.net. It's a very simple website to navigate. You click on there's a career.
And it's getting better and better every day. We're certainly going to submit this. He's evaluated over 3,000 Maydays so far, and this is a growing thing. So if you checked it a month ago, 6 months ago, go back to it regularly. This is going to change a lot of things in the fire service. So I can't say enough to back you up with that, Terry.
And with that too, and I'm the world's worst about filling out surveys and participating, how many engines do you have and all that kind of stuff. But this is something that if you've got data to give to this project, do it. Because like I said, it's a tremendous resource, and it's incredibly rich in information that regardless of the size department, whether you're volunteer or combination or paid, doesn't matter. All of this applies to you and what you're doing on a daily basis. And I urge any company officer out there, make this part of what you talk about with your people.
And he does have a career and volunteer report.
Right.
Those two reports are available. So
it's
for everybody.
Yep, absolutely. So that's projectmayday.net. Give it a look if you haven't. And we actually, in the interest of full disclosure, Chief Thompson tried to reach out to Don Abbott and see if he would actually come on here with us today. I'm sure he's requested quite often, as this is a pretty popular subject, a pretty popular report. And I certainly,
as his phone recording said, he's retired and he was napping, so he'll get back to me. So hopefully,
you might still hear from him.
Yeah.
But I certainly hope that he doesn't have any issues with us grabbing or stealing what he had put out there. Because anyway, it's an interesting read. As we wrap things up here today, I want to give the an opportunity for Captain Rushuber. If somebody wanted to reach out, if somebody else wanted to talk to you or ask you any questions, certainly company officers or anybody and ask a little bit. Is there a way that somebody can get a hold of you? Email?
Sure. It's CRAUSCHUBER colonytx.gov. I'd be happy to answer any questions or give any advice or the things I've learned. So.
All right, appreciate it. And Scott, what about you? Anybody want to get a hold of you or talk to you? Get a copy of your book. How do they do that?
Scott at fireserviceleadership.com. And again, we'll be glad to share whatever. We're going to do a formal report on this. I'm almost done with it. I'm working on it, but we're going to be very honest. One of the things that I think Chief Brunacini did an excellent job of after Brett Tarver's incident was they did the recovery process. So we're going to be very open, very honest. And when we get this done, we'll share, with any department that want it. So just contact me and I'll get you what I have, but give us a week or two.
All right, I appreciate it. I can be reached at first initial last name T McGrath at cityoflouisville.com. And if you want to reach out to Chief Lasky or talk to him about presenting any type of class, you can reach him at 5alarmleadership@gmail.com. I appreciate your time. Thank you all for the both of you for coming on. Thank you for your candid information and responses, and my hat's off to the Colony Fire Department and the job that you guys did. Certainly on this call, you guys were, you did well, and I appreciate you sharing that information with us today. We never walk out of here without saying in closing, please keep the men and women serving in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and remember that never forgetting means never forgetting. Thank you, and be safe.